I met Alec many years ago when I was training at Taikai. We didn't get a chance to really get to know each other too well because by the time I started training at Taikai, in just a few years after that, he left to pursue his store management, his retail management career. He went to go run a few Wegmans downstate in Pennsylvania, and I didn't get a chance to really connect with him. But now here we are so many years later, and he has left his retail management career and is now in the real estate world. Him and I got a chance to catch up with one another, and we talked a lot about our real estate business, and you'll hear in a little bit just how similar our paths are. It was really great getting to just know Alec on more of like a professional level as well as a friend level. It's cool seeing his business grow year after year, and I could really understand why after this conversation. He just is so genuine and so sincere with his words that it's really easy for customers and clients to relate with Alec. So if you like real estate, you like jiu-jitsu, this is a great podcast for you. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Cory Cast with my friend Alec Kearns. And happy Thanksgiving! Our friends at Detroit Boxing Company are dedicated to providing high-quality boxing apparel. With fighters and fight fans in mind, their designs are unique and stylish. With their hats, shirts, hoodies, jackets, they are going to make your jab cross hook look even more sexy. They have great classic t-shirts that feature some of boxing's biggest legends. Tommy Hearns, James Tooney, Jimmy Paul, and more. The people behind this company are simply wonderful, and they truly care about the boxing community. You have to check out their website at DetroitBoxingCompany.com and see the full catalog of all the great stuff they have available. Scoop up some fresh gear and just make sure you use the code word CoryCast at checkout, and you're going to save yourself a little bit of money. Check out their Instagram page at Detroit Boxing Company and hit that follow button. Just let them know that Cory sent you. With Thanksgiving around the corner, I just wanted to take the time and say thank you for listening to the podcast. This really just started as a project to help me get better at holding conversations and also kind of help enlighten me to different viewpoints, different hobbies that I've never seen in the world. And it has really blossomed into one of the most creative, fulfilling things that I do. Hearing how much you love an episode or hearing that you loved a particular guest, is just really so special to me. So I wanted to take the time and say I am thankful for your time. Your time is super valuable, and you investing your time listening to these episodes is really special. So thank you so much, and I am excited to see what this next year of the podcast brings. I hope I continue to bring you exciting, interesting guests with different viewpoints, because after all, that is how we grow. So I hope you have a awesome Thanksgiving, and thanks for listening. I'm glad we did this because we were literally just talking before this that our lives have had like the same paths.
Yep.
You started at Wegmans, right?
Yeah. Yep.
For how long were you at Wegmans for?
So I started at Wegmans when I was like 15, and then I actually relocated down to this area when I was, I guess, 19. They had given me like a relocation package and everything, so we moved down. My now wife, at the time girlfriend, was a few years older than me, so she had just graduated Syracuse and was looking for a place to go with her master's. So we ended up down here outside of Philadelphia, in the suburbs, in a place called Westchester. And basically, I stayed with Wegmans for a few years once we got down here, and then eventually made the jump into real estate around maybe like a little bit after you jumped into real estate.
Yeah, I started May 2018. Is that about the same time for you?
Okay, no, I think I was like 2020. So I guess a little bit.
Oh, okay. What?
Yeah. So
I left retail because I was like just kind of tired of like that whole grind. What was it for you that made you want to go into real estate?
Yeah, I mean, so I've always kind of enjoyed real estate, right? So when I first moved down here, my in-laws were in the process of buying a new house, and so I kind of watched that whole process, and I was like, oh, seems really cool. And then I actually bought my first house when I was 22, and I used one of the tactics that they had used. I had gone in without a realtor and kind of had to do a lot of the negotiating myself. And I don't know, is New York a dual agency state or no?
Yeah, you can do dual agency. For me though, I don't practice it. I stay away from it. I don't want that headache.
Same. That's the exact thing that
Yeah.
so because of how I kind of got acclimated with real estate was I went in and essentially negotiated for myself, but it was a dual agency situation. I kind of saw the headache that it was for the realtor on the other end to kind of be balancing both, just especially with
Yeah.
the actual, because back in 2015, negotiations were a lot different than they have been so far these last.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You guys bought your house in 2015?
yeah, 2015.
Dude, so funny. Brittany and I bought our first house 2016.
Really? That's wild, man. That's
It's so
wild.
funny. That's hilarious. And who did you didn't have a real estate agent when you bought your house?
Yeah, so we went in, open house, didn't have a real estate agent. It was like the first house that we had looked at a few open houses, but we weren't super serious. I mean, we had gotten married 20 days before this and had just gotten back from our honeymoon. And there
Oh
was
wow.
a bunch of changes that were happening on the lending side on October 1st. And so we went like September 27th or something like that and looked at this house and kind of fell in love with it. And in this area that we didn't really know anything about, it's called Phoenixville. And we moved there, or well, we went there and we, went to the open house and fell in love, sat down, went through all the negotiations and stuff. And we had kind of felt pressured to get in before all of these deadlines, because a lot of people who ended up going under contract on October 1st, October 2nd, that first week, they weren't closing until like mid to late December, just because of all of these new regulations that the lenders had to go through. So we were like, all right, we got to make a move on it real quick. So we did. And, so we didn't have time to shop around and find an agent or anything. We just ended up using the agent who was at the open house, who also was the listing agent. So.
Gotcha. Now, in your state, you guys can close in 30 days, right?
Yeah. So actually, believe it or not, I have a lender that I work with here. We can close in technically 7, but normally it ends up being about 12 to 15. Yeah. So they'll do the underwriting process before you've actually gone under contract on a house with just the property address to be determined. Once they get the agreement of sale, it's dependent on whether or not it's granted an appraisal waiver or not. But if it is granted an appraisal waiver and we don't have to worry about getting an appraiser out there, we can technically close in the minimum 7, but I've never seen anything under like 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, in New York State, it takes 60 days. That's minimum when you get financing.
60 days.
60 days. Dude, that's minimum. So you're saying like, oh man, we got in October, we weren't even closed on mid-December. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, dude, that's like still, I don't know, that's like, that sounds good to me though. It drives me nuts. It drives me crazy that in this state, every other state except for like us, California, and there's one more.
New Jersey's is New Jersey a lawyer state?
I think so. Yeah, that sounds right. It takes forever. It takes us 60 days. And the second that I turn it over, everything's just like completely out of my hands. There's so many hands that are in the pot.
Yep.
When you guys close, is it just you and a title company?
Yeah. So it's pretty great, just because it's essentially you're with the client throughout the entire process. Or, occasionally we'll utilize transaction coordinators and stuff that'll kind of like help bring it from the point of contract to closing. But for the most part, any sort of negotiation that goes down, where it's all directly through the agent. So the same way the negotiation starts with you guys when you're actually, negotiating the terms of the agreement of sale, we continue that through with everything, but there's no extra hands that are fighting in when they're looking at the inspection reports, or when we're looking at, we also don't have to do surveys on every single property. So that saves a lot of the back and forth. Now I have the guy that I use for title, he has his license to practice law in 5 different states, and he did do title work in New York, and he still does title work in New Jersey. And he always is like, it's not a great system to not have surveys, because I get calls from these $4 million houses down on the main line of Philadelphia, and they're like, my neighbor says that they own my driveway, and he's like, they probably do.
Yeah. No, that's like it's just completely, it's so weird how the systems are different between state to state. Like we have once you get the commitment letter, That's when the attorney, that's like could be 30 days into the transaction. That's when the attorneys order the survey, update the title work and all that stuff. And like, it's like crunch time. And those surveys have really shown some issues and saved my clients some headaches. Like,
Yeah.
there's one house in the city of Syracuse that I sold that the actually was going to sell, but the driveway, they had just changed the street and the street used to like curve, but the access to the driveway was technically on the city of Syracuse land. So without that survey, we wouldn't have known that you technically don't own like literally 20 feet of your driveway.
Wow.
So you guys don't do any surveys unless they request it?
Yeah, unless you actually put it into the agreement of sale that you want to have a survey and you're going to make the deal contingent on that. So obviously, with how the market's been these last 2 years, people haven't been having any contingencies for the most part. I mean, I've seen people waiving the financing contingency while still getting financing. I'm sure you've seen the same thing. Just so that way they didn't have, there was no way that they were going to be able to back out to just make their offers look more attractive. So for the most part, most people do not get surveys. I mean, I've seen, commercial, which I do a little bit of commercial. You pretty much always have to get a survey, but residential, nope.
So you do more residential, just a few commercial?
Yeah, I do more residential, but a little bit of commercial. So I started getting into commercial at the beginning of the year, and it's good. It's a totally different world, though.
Does your brokerage have like a commercial department?
So we're pretty unique. We actually have a few different departments. So we have at our brokerage, I'm at our actual office. I'm pretty much the only one who does commercial at this point. But our company has a commercial real estate division, a residential real estate division, a private aviation division, a yachting division, and then a like business development, more like focused on like land.
Oh, because it's like, how do you say your brokerage name? I feel like I can never say it right.
Engel and Volkers.
So they're like a luxury brokerage, right?
Yeah. So to give you a little bit of the history on the brand, because it's actually pretty unique and it's something that I feel like, they've done really well. So they started off in Germany in like the late 70s. And real estate's done completely differently over there. Whereas, in the US, just there's obviously a huge focus on contracts when it comes to agency agreements. Just because obviously, I don't know if it's because maybe it's more likely to happen in the U.S. and less in Europe, but in the U.S., obviously, if we didn't have contracts, people would be trying to negotiate on their own, and we have all those brokerage protection clauses for that reason. In Europe, it's kind of just seen as a cost of doing business for a lot of people, so people are just like, the fee is what the fee is. But there's a lot more situations where you'll have agency, where you'll have 2 or 3 agents from different brokerages trying to sell the same property, and they'll be switching back and forth like pretty rapidly, just because they don't have the same sort of brokerage protections. So the people who tend to win out in a lot of the European markets are the ones who are dedicated to service, right? They're the ones who are really like going above and beyond. So our company kind of found themselves being very successful in the luxury market in Germany because they were really focused on being a service company first and a real estate company second. And so they found that they just tended to attract a lot of, luxury clientele. And so they started their expansion. And as they started their expansion, they identified areas in Europe where a lot of their homeowners might have secondary vacation homes. So like Mallorca and places in like Italy and, Saint Tropez and just all these different places where you might have secondary homes for these clients. And they continue their expansion towards, okay, well, we've got all these clients that they also have a house in Florida or LA or New York or, the Bahamas or somewhere in the Caribbean. So they kind of started their expansion across the US. And at that time, they were really focused on like being a full service for all their clients in terms of like their vacation home, their regular home. If they wanted to buy a yacht, if they wanted to buy a plane, they wanted to get into that. And then they kind of realized that the residential real estate market in the core of America, not just the secondary home market, was a great place where they could kind of differentiate themselves given how dedicated they were to service. So they started their expansion across the rest of the continental US, and they've been very slowly expanding. So like we're the one and only office in all of Pennsylvania. One of my coworkers, her husband is the kicker for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Chris Boswell, or I'm sorry, her fiance. But even though she's 5 hours away in Pittsburgh, we're the only office in the state. So she's technically based out of our office.
Whoa, dude, that is wild. And so why, when you got into real estate, you've always been with that brokerage?
Yeah, so I actually got pretty lucky in terms of how I found it. I was as I was getting my license, I talked to all the big players locally. I wanted to talk to Berkshire Hathaway and Coldwell Banker, and obviously like the Keller Williams and all the different brokerages to kind of see and get a feel of where I could find my values aligned best. And coming from a service background and retail, I felt like that was a big piece of everything. And I found a lot of brokerages were, very focused on the marketing. They were very focused on, just like lead generation, all that stuff. But then I had called an agent that I knew who worked with Berkshire and was like, hey, can we talk? He was in a different office than the one I'd already talked to. But I wanted to see, because I was familiar with the office, because that's where the agent that I used to buy my first house, the dual agent, he was out of. So I call him up and I'm like, hey, can we talk about how much you like Berkshire? And he was like, actually, don't tell anybody, but in 3 days, I'm leaving Berkshire. And he kind of filled me in on this Engel and Volkers. So I was one of the first people to come over with him. So I actually, got my license and immediately hung it here, which was very lucky to kind of find it that way.
Wow. Well, you had the smart approach to it, like interviewing at multiple brokerages. I did literally the exact opposite. I only interviewed at Howard Hanna, and actually it worked out for me because I freaking love the company, and I went here because when I worked in retail, I had a good friend, Donna Jordan, who we worked at PetSmart together forever when I was 17 years old, and she had just gotten to real estate. And I went to coffee with her, and I was just chatting with her about the real estate, career path. And she told me that she could be my mentor. And I was like, "What? That'd be awesome. That seems like a no-brainer." And then took the classes and signed up, and I haven't thought twice about it since. I really like it here. It's kind of you did the right thing. Like if there's anybody who's thinking about getting into real estate, you should like interview at multiple brokerages because you might not get lucky. You might pick one that doesn't align with your core values. So like with them, you felt like their values really aligned with you with the customer service aspect of it. Do they also have like really cool tools and marketing techniques and stuff?
Yeah, so they definitely have some really interesting marketing techniques. Obviously, and anybody who's done real estate or just kind of when you really sit down and think about it, the best way to make a living in this business is to be a listing agent, right? Obviously, when you work with buyers, I think the last statistic I heard was that what it takes to work with, I think it was like four, I believe it was like 4 listings is the same equivalent amount of time as it is to work with like 28 buyers or something crazy like that. Just does that sound? I mean, that.
Yeah, it makes right. I mean, because with buyers, I mean, think about how much time you have invest with them, and especially when you're writing offer 2, offer 3, offer 4, offer 5 with them, with a seller, it's a little less time invested.
Exactly. And like, obviously there's shifts in markets. When it's a buyer's market, buyers are like, it's great to have a buyer. When it's a seller's market, obviously it's great to have a seller's, but that's what we've had for the last 2 years. But for the most part, when you sign a list or an agency agreement with a buyer and you sign an agency agreement with a seller, for the most part, if you sign one with a seller, that is a higher percentage chance that that's going to bring you to the closing table and get you your check. So we try to position ourselves primarily as a listing service company. Obviously, we all work with buyers. I've worked with probably just the same amount of buyers as I have with listing agent or with listings, but we try and dedicate most of our technological tools into what we can do to differentiate ourselves from a listing perspective. And they have a lot of obviously everybody's got their own different stuff in terms of client management and all that, and we all have all of our different vendors that we use and whatnot. But I think that this company takes a really unique approach to how we go about getting listings, and just what we have I'm technically not allowed to, like, my broker doesn't want me to share too much about the whole process.
Whatever you're comfortable with, no pressure.
But we basically, it's a multiple step process that involves a lot of back and forth. And one of the things that we do that's unique too, I know you mentioned something about before we were on the podcast, just about the office. So they kind of go above and beyond with we don't refer to them as offices, we refer to them as shops. And we're like retail storefront on like a main street. So if I walk a few minutes down the road, there's like a amazing bakery coffee shop that has, like any given day, there's 40 people just sitting outside having coffee. It's one of the more popular spots. There's like an ice cream shop right up the road. We're like right on a main street in the town called Malvern. And we have pretty much all like a lot of glass windows so people can see in. And we try and make our offices more of like a shop that's like for entertaining, to bring people in. So we leverage that when we have listing appointments, and we try and get them to come out to our shops to show them a lot of the different tools and stuff that we have. We have a very unique approach just to, how we kind of get them in the door and what we utilize to, just go above and beyond in the service aspect.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you guys have like designated office spaces?
Yeah, so we have right now I'm in the conference room. I don't know if you can see, but we've got a bunch of different listings that go back behind us that like we circle through. So we have a pretty interesting global presence. Like all the ones that are going back, like that one's 4.8 million. I'm sure the next one is probably that one's 2.9. But we'll see ones that are like just crazy. I was out in Vegas at an event, I think right after you left the Howard Hanna event, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, short time after.
Yeah, and
it's weird how many parallels our lives have. It's so wild. It's so
wild. But I was talking to someone from the Vail, Colorado office with like the ski towns, and she was just telling me, she was like, yeah, it used to be like a big deal when we would sell anything over 20 million, but now we don't really make a big deal of it unless it's like over like 35 or 40 million.
Oh my God, Alec! Like the highest I've ever sold is like just shy of 500,000. I'm like a million. Oh my God, I'm sweating. And she's like, I don't really blink unless it's over 35 million.
Dude, trust me, there's not much like that around. I mean, there's not much in the way of 35 million around me either. I would, if I met someone who wanted to sell a $35 million house, I'm pretty sure I would just pass out at the thought. But
yeah, I would throw rose petals at their feet, buy them coffee every single day. You want a massage while we list this bad boy? I'm giving you a massage.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we have so kind of like of the essence of the fact that like a lot of people don't, when I talk to people, they don't necessarily know who Engel and Volkers is, right? Because we're the first outfit in all of Pennsylvania. But there are people that when I talk to them, they know them because they're like, oh yeah, I bought my house in Florida with them, or I bought my house in the Caribbean with them. So we actually have one coming up that myself and another advisor are going to be listing. It's not going to get listed until the springtime, but that one's just, they walked right in and they were like, hey, we know you guys, and their house is, that one's going to be 4.75.
So you have the strike. You guys call yourselves advisors.
Yes.
Even like that's a very interesting play. Like I've never heard of that before. It's kind of like adds another like level of prestige to the experience.
Yeah, that's like one of our big things when we're trying to, because I also am involved in recruitment and business development for the office. So like when we're trying to recruit people, that like one of our whole things is like changing you from agent to advisor, just because like the term advisor just kind of gives that it's what they call themselves in when you have someone managing your finances. It's a private wealth advisor. It's and we just kind of feel that if you're going to have that approach to the money you have invested in the market, obviously from the majority of people, the real estate that they buy is the largest purchase they'll make in their whole life. So we should probably refer to ourselves the same way you would if you're dealing with, someone who's managing your money, because we're managing your biggest purchase of your life or your biggest asset if you're going to sell it.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I like it. It's kind of cool. It's like we have an agent here in our market who he calls himself the concierge agent, right? It's like he provides a higher level of service, right? And the advisor thing is just like another way to like showcase that you're offering a higher level of service and that your brand's also a little bit different,
Yeah.
Like you guys really are. When you guys started, what do you think was what weren't you expecting when you got into real estate?
So when I got into real estate, I think obviously there's a lot of uncertainty, as you know, and for any new agent, I think that's the biggest thing. Kind of helping out with the recruiting. I've been talking to a lot of people who are in the process of getting their license, or maybe they've been doing it for 2 years and they were on a team, but they've never really worked much in terms of lead generation on their own. And there's always that big unknown of like, because no one's paying you a salary when you're in real estate.
Yeah.
You're only getting paid when you have, once you're closing deals. And to actually get to the table to close deals, obviously first you have to get, people that are willing to work with you. And the process of getting people to work with you, whether it's family, friends, or people who don't know you, can be really daunting, because even when it's a family member or a good friend, they'll look at you and be like, you've never done this in your life, or you've done one deal, and this is my largest asset. Like, why should I trust you to sell it? And it can be really tough. And I actually we became Engel and Volkers. I got my license and all that stuff, and we became Engel and Volkers, and we were still out of like a small, like temporary office box space while our office was being built. But it was like me, my broker, and like 2 or 3 other people. And the week that we became Engel and Volkers, I actually got my first listing appointment, and it was with someone that I didn't know very well. It was like my wife's friend that we had recently met, so we didn't know each other very well, her mother-in-law. So like I had obviously never met her. And they found out I was a real estate agent, and I had never worked with anybody at this point before. And I went in and they had interviewed 3 agents. So it was me, Keller Williams agent, and I can't remember, I think it might've been a Berkshire Caldwell banker, someone, but so it's the 3 of us. And actually, like, the information that I brought about Engel and Volkers and just kind of what we did to differentiate actually won me the listing. So I got super lucky that like within my first like real week of doing this, I got a listing, which was pretty wild.
Not everybody gets,
especially
their first, like some people don't even get a listing for their first like year in real estate.
So like that kind of, I got into it expecting to it take 6 months before I got my first check of any sort. I got very lucky that started, but then obviously, the next year was every week was not lucky after that week. There was a lot more getting back to just the basics of lead generation. And obviously I was getting into the market at a time in which real estate was really kind of going, it was wild. We still had COVID protocols that we were following, but then obviously homes were selling like crazy. So kind of getting in and learning the marketplace at that. I tried to not have too many expectations, but this last year has definitely been really, really kind of above even what I thought it was going to be. So it's been good.
How do you show your value to that person? Is it mostly talking about the brand, but now that you have experience, do you talk more about your services and speak to more about what you do as an agent?
Yeah. So I think, for the most part, it's always dependent on the client, right? It's always dependent on the relationship you have. Like I've had plenty of people, like there's a purple belt that I train jiu-jitsu with that, and a lot of times the jiu-jitsu people that I work with, and I'm sure you have a similar thing, they just tell you that they're working with you.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Last year, dude, I'm not kidding you. Like 25% of my business base came from Taikai.
Yeah, exactly. I remember someone asked me earlier this year, because I had a really good March and I had a bunch of deals come in March, and they were like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Training jiu-jitsu."
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Yeah.
I had someone once just like literally like my belt was hanging out of my gym bag. And while he was talking about like us working, we were just, we happened to be talking about working together, like out in the parking lot. And he just picked up like the end of my belt and was like, "That's how I know you're a good real estate agent." Like, he's just like, you don't get a brown belt in jiu-jitsu without being someone who's like dedicated and hardworking. So I just assume that you're like that in all aspects of your life.
Yeah, man. Like that too. And also like, I think people want to work with you because you have that commonality. You guys both love martial arts, and it's not like there's a lot of people who genuinely don't give a shit if you're a top producing agent. There are some, right? Like I'm sure higher end clients want that top producing agent, but a majority of us just want to do business with Alec because they're like, dude, I see him at the gym all the time. He's hilarious. He's technical. He's really good at jiu-jitsu. I want him to represent me in my real estate transaction because that sounds fantastic, and those are the connections that you build on. I'm like, Taikai gave me 25% of my business last year. Like it's so wild how that works.
Yeah, it really is. And it's, so obviously like when you're kind of talking to a client and demonstrating your value, it's, it just depends on the person. And that's one thing that I always tell every new agent is like, do you have a hobby or something that like brings you close to like a sense of community? You know, there's a ton of real estate agents that it's like they get 25% of their business from their church, or they get 25% of their business from their rock climbing gym, or 25% from their kids' private school that they do a bunch of events at, or whatever. Like it's, you know, so that's always the first thing. But then obviously as you get outside of that, you know, that sphere of commonality that you have, you know, with people, or your sphere of influence, when you're meeting with people that maybe are more on the outskirts of like, you know them, but you don't know them super well, or you know, are just meeting them for the first or second time, and you're, you know, whether it's a cold call or a lead that you picked up from somewhere. I find that when I talk to those people, the first thing that I really like hit on is just the service aspect, and you know, just kind of the fact that we really differentiate ourselves in terms of that. And for example, with that house that we're going to be listing for 4.75, they had bad experiences in the past working with top producing agents in our, like, some of the agents that were top producing in our entire MLS, which stretches from like DC all the way up to, you know, parts of Jersey and most of PA. And you're talking about agents that are in like the top of that, and they were just like, it just wasn't, we were just another number. So I find, you know, really hitting on the fact that it's going to be an extra level of service, and then also just leveraging different tools and techniques that we use. Obviously, you know, because I know, because my dad always tells me all the stuff you do in terms of photography and stuff, and just kind of going above and beyond.
Yeah, that's one of my value propositions. When I sit across from a seller, I always speak to the value of video, and even now more than ever. Like before 2020, I was doing it, but it was more just like I bought a gimbal. I talked to your dad. He hooked me up with like a phone gimbal, and I was filming like walkthroughs with my phone. Upgraded to a GoPro, and now like the last like 2 years, TikTok and Reels and short form videos have been taken off. So it's like there are some niches in my market that do it, but there's not nearly enough. So it's like my one piece that I can be like, hey, look, everybody hires a professional photographer. Everybody can market and send postcards out. Everybody can do social media ad, but I also do video. Like we film it, we put everything together, and it's another way that I can show my value to the seller. Just a different way to differentiate myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, you know, the video piece is so huge. That's one of the first things I did while getting my real estate license. I got my Part 107 drone, commercial drone pilot's license.
Yes, dude, that's a smart idea. I feel like that would be the next move for me.
Yeah, definitely hit my dad up and ask him, because I think he's got some core, you know, some like study guides or something. But because that's what I did. You know, I just asked him for some help. And but like, for example, the other day, so I have a listing in my neighborhood. I live in a townhouse community. You know, when we bought the house, it was like, all right, this is going to be our first house, you know, or whatever, moving to a single family at some point. But I'll tell you what, like switching into real estate, living in a townhouse community is so great, because there's, you know, I think 238 units in my development. The average sale price, so I sold one for 435. You know, I've got one on the market right now for 410. Like, for the most part, you know, there's, to live in a community where there's 238 units that are all typically around that 400 range. Yeah. And that's like, in our market, that's a lot of first time home buyers or downsizers. So there's a ton of turnover. You know, I did the math and I'm like, all right, if I did a third of the turnover in our development every year, like like I could live off of that. That could be, you know, and everything else.
How do you capture those people? How do you get those people to work with you?
So obviously, you know, we have a really nice community in terms of the amount of like events that we have. So the first thing is like showing up to community events. We have, you know, a ton of people that just, whether it's a normal Friday night, they'll have, you know, like they have bars in their garage and people go and hang out, you know, so like trying to go to events like that. And also we have like, you know, we'll have like big block parties, you know, normally like 1 or 2 during the summer. Like my street, we have around Memorial Day, we have like a big barbecue. And then like sometime in July, we had like a big seafood broil. And then, you know, just so trying to go to events like that. But then also I've concentrated most of my farming into just my, you know, within a couple miles of my house. So like I don't distribute a ton of materials like, you know, postcards and door hangers and that kind of stuff to like just random. I focus a lot of it on my development. So like the one that I just listed for 410, I had actually never met the seller, but he sent me an email. I was like, hey man, you know, I get your postcards all the time. Like nice. I'm in the process of selling, you know, I want to get ready to sell. Like, can we meet up? So
yeah. What is like your top 3 lead generation business practices?
So jiu-jitsu is probably the best one in terms of like percentage.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Doing just the act of doing and participating in something that you love is one of your biggest sources of lead generation.
It's great. It's like the best thing ever, you know?
Yeah.
It's absolutely the best thing ever because I could just get to like, you know, like yesterday in the middle of the workday, I went at 12 o'clock and trained, you know, and like spent the last, like right after class, talked to someone who, you know, is potentially in the next like year or so going to be selling and buying. You know, we've talked back and forth, and I'm like, that's part of I'd say that's part of business. That's just like, that's me doing work, you know, I'm going to jiu-jitsu to do work. So that's a big one. I think another thing, obviously, the conversion rate on any sort of like pamphlet distributions, any sort of that stuff isn't always super high, but you know, if you do it enough, eventually it kind of comes in. But I find that the two kind of unique things that I do that have bode relatively well. So I'm on the development committee of the food bank, which is a pretty large nonprofit in the area. And I donate $500 for every listing to the food bank. So just kind of like advertising that on like Facebook pages and stuff like that. Because, you know, a lot of pages, they don't want you to advertise like your real estate services. Obviously, then every single community forum would just be realtors nonstop being, and, you know, HVAC service companies and all that stuff. But I'm totally allowed to showcase like, hey, I partner with the food bank, so I do this. So that's definitely helped a lot. I've gotten some people that, you know, I've never met through that. My son's school, it's cooperative 501c nonprofit school. I donate 10%. If anyone's within the network of the school, I give 10% back to the school after the closing, 10% of my commission.
Oh, nice.
So that like helps people because they, you know, they do financial aid and that stuff. So it helps people with getting, you know, financial aid and stuff. So I try and do some of that. And then honestly, like things that I do, there's a local coffee shop right near me, that's also a nonprofit. So they partner with a thing called Camp Hill, which is focused on people with intellectual disabilities. So like they, you know, give them employment opportunities at a coffee through this larger nonprofit. They own a coffee shop that they'll send people to work at with intellectual disabilities. And it's just like a great spot for people to go. I'll buy stacks of gift cards and like they'll put them in envelopes for me, and I'll just put my business card in there, and I'll just go and sit in the coffee shop and do work on my computer. When people come in, I'll just be like, hey, coffee's on me today, and just give them a $5 gift card or whatever. And
Dude, I'm stealing that idea. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's a good one. And like like we have an event, we're going to like a chili cook-off that we're sponsoring on Sunday, and like that's not anywhere near the coffee shop. So I just bought some Starbucks gift cards, and we're going to do like, you know, not give them out to every single person, but we're going to kind of do like pick a business card. And if they pick the one that's got the dot on it, then we give them a, you know, $5 Starbucks gift card. But
yeah, dude, I'm definitely stealing that idea from you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, dude, dude, let's do it. That's like, you absolutely should. It's honestly I feel like the conversion rate of that is so much higher percentage. Cause like a lot of people just take it and be like, yeah, thanks, man. Like, that's great or whatever. And then a lot of people just like, they just want to talk to you, you know, they're like, oh, and they'll like sit down with their coffee and just like talk with you. And next thing you know, you're like, all right, like we're friends now. And, you know, we're on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever by the time they leave. And then, you know, they'll call you back in a few months and be like, hey, I think I'm ready to sell now. So
yeah. That's like your dad came up to me at the gym, and he was like, he's like, dude, I didn't realize how much you have to like constantly be prospecting in your job. He goes, Alec went to a car show, and he said that he was going there and he was just handing out his business cards all the time, just trying to meet new people. And your dad was like, I don't think I would ever want to deal with that shit. He's like, I don't want to have to do with that. And I go, no, it's actually kind of fun because you like really get to like meet some cool people that you like have really cool interests and like really can help like connect with them. I don't know. I like it because you get to really connect with people in cool, unique ways, you know?
Yeah. It's
even if it's not like a business perspective, it's just an opportunity to talk to somebody cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the one thing that like probably why you've done so well, you know, and like people who come from a service background, like I feel like we just like to talk to people, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and it's tough to go out there and prospect when your only goal is just to get a new client.
Yeah.
But it's a lot easier to go out when your goal is just like, I just want to talk to people and just meet people and, you know, like make friends. Then all of a sudden it's so much easier to turn those into, whether it's 5 months, 5 years or what, it doesn't matter. Like the point is you're just getting out there and you're talking, and obviously, it continues to build on itself over the course of your entire career. And you get to do so many cool things. Like I was at an event, someone that I met through the development committee of the food, doing food bank stuff. I met him. He's the senior vice president of business development at Meridian Bank, which is like a medium-sized bank. They do a lot of local lending and a lot of people work with them, but they're not like a small little outfit. They do a ton of commercial lending, SBA lending. They do mortgages as well, but for the most part, a lot of their business is in private wealth management and stuff like that. So, he and I got to know each other, and he's like, hey man, why don't you come out to this event? So like last Thursday, I was out at this golf event, and the course that we were at is I think the buying, like the initiation fee is like $100,000 or something like that. And it's
God,
dude, and it's like the most gorgeous golf course I've like ever been on. I'm like, this golf course is, and like the pros, they had hired a couple pros to come out and like help us with our golfing, and like I'm hanging out with people like I don't know if you know the name if you're a football guy, but like Brent Selleck was like the tight end for the Eagles for a while. And, like all these guys that are like in business, and it's just so like it's so cool and to be able to like go to events like that and just like meet people and just spend time talking to just like I was talking to when we first moved down here. We moved into an apartment that was owned by this group called the Hankin Group, and they own a ton of commercial real estate and apartment buildings in Pennsylvania and in Florida. And like I was at this event and I'm talking to like the president of that company. And I'm like, dude, I used to live in your apartments like a few years ago. Like, and it's just crazy to get to meet, you get to meet all kinds of people from all different walks of life. And it's just such a cool thing. And I think that's probably my favorite part of the business.
Isn't it nice being in a career and not a job?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. When she said that, that resonated with me because I was like, man, when I worked at retail, it just felt like every day I was showing up to a job, I'd punch a clock, leave, and then that was it, right? I felt like I wasn't like I was kind of just spinning my tires. But with this is like it's totally different. I feel like there's a better sense of fulfillment. You know what I mean? And like a better sense of I don't know, self-worth, I guess. I don't know, not to get like too crazy or like arrogant on the whole thing. Just like it just I don't know, it was a lot more fulfilling to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What is the best piece of advice you ever got in real estate?
Oh, the best piece of advice I've ever gotten in real estate. It's tough. There's been so much good advice over the years, whether it's from, experienced agents, new agents, going to like different conferences and stuff like that. I feel like you always get such good advice. I think the thing that's always resonated, obviously we have all of our values and stuff like that kind of like are almost a piece of advice in themselves. But I think that when I've talked to some really successful agents, I think the biggest thing for me really has kind of going back to that listing piece. That's always like resonated with me in my mind because obviously like given my age and the demographic of a lot of people I know, and also the home prices where I'm at, they're, for the most part, most of the time I would say a lot of people when they're buying their first home, they're between 250 and 500 for their first house, which is obviously kind of crazy. And there's a lot of homes. Like I was at an event with a builder yesterday, and the houses we were in were 2.6 million, 2.2 million. Like they're gorgeous houses.
Yeah.
And so I found that I tend to probably know a lot more people in my sphere that are buyers, but I constantly remind myself to do prospecting for listings just because those listings, I think that's probably the best piece, is that listings are pretty much going to be a guaranteed source of income because they will sell at some point. As long as you continue to give them incredible service and make sure that they want to stay with you, whether it's a month, a week, 6 months down the road, or you end up renewing that agency contract and you keep it listed for a while, like eventually that house will sell. Whereas with a buyer, you might not always think things change in life. People might, need to move. They might not want to buy anymore. And, you don't always know when you sign that contract that buyer is going to end up closing.
Do you use the buyer agency agreement in Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Is that like standard? Does everybody use that?
Yeah. And obviously, it's kind of the same thing. I'm sure that you see, like everybody is supposed to use it, but some people won't sign it until they're actually putting an offer through because they're just like, Yeah, whatever. Like we know we're going to work with you, and some people will require you to sign it the first time that they meet you, so that way you don't go off with somebody else. It just depends on the person, the relationship. I tend to not make people sign it until we've at least like worked together a little bit, so that way they trust me. Or if they're like a jiu-jitsu person, 9 times out of 10 they're just like, yeah, whatever. Like I'm going to work with you no matter what. So it just depends on the person. But yeah, we do use those.
Do you have like a state when you first meet somebody? We have New York State agency form. We go over what our relationship is. Then we have a fair housing form. Do you guys have like those also with the buyer? Like the buyer agency, it's not required by law for us to fill out. That's kind of like a business practice for people. But the agency and the fair housing are both required.
Yeah, so we have the main one. We just refer to it as the consumer notice. That's the main one that's required at the first meeting of any sort of real estate professional, and it does exactly that. It breaks out what the agency relationships are and the definition of each agency relationship. So that's always the first thing that we do. And then all of the buyer's agency stuff, we require it at our brokerage, and most of the brokerages around require it once you're like putting in offers. But it's not one of those things that like it's like if our MLS were to come audit us, they would want to make sure that we had those with each completed contract, but it's not necessary for each business relationship until you've actually, gone under contract.
That's interesting. Yeah, I here in New York, honestly, in my market, you hardly see agents doing the buyer agency. It's not required. It's just a good business practice, and I do it every time I meet somebody right at the first start. And I know like having a real estate agent have you sign 3 things when you first meet them is kind of like a little overbearing. And I always say that buyer agency form, I'm like, we don't have to fill this out, but this sheet provides me an opportunity to be like, hey, this is how agents work. We don't get paid until the closing. If I'm going to write you 4 offers, show you 20 houses, I want to make sure I get paid for my work, and I want to make sure I get compensated for my time. So all I ask is don't work with other agents, just work with me exclusively. And then if you feel like I've done a shit job, we'll tear this up. I'll throw it in the trash, and then I'm not going to hold you to it. So once I say that, it kind of becomes like arbitrary, but like I don't want people to feel like they're locked in. It's more like a piece for me to be like, hey, this is how real estate works. This is how we get paid. Doesn't it seems fair, right? And 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, sure. We'll sign, but like the way you present it, like really changed for me when I got my ABR designation, the accredited buyer representative. That was like the main focus was how to get them to sign it, how to present it to them, and how to make them comfortable with the form. I make it a standard practice for once when I first meet you, boom, 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 the 3 forms. We just sign them just to get them done and over with. Just to, I want a layer of protection,
Yep.
It's a wild business, Alec.
Yeah, no, it's true. And actually, it's funny that you say that because I had a friend up, by your area, and he was always asking me for advice and stuff like that. And he was like, he was looking at houses. He had an agent show them a few houses that, they like, I guess his wife kind of knew, not like super close or anything like that, but they went and saw a bunch of houses and, put in a couple offers, didn't get anything. And then a family member was like, hey, I have this house I want to sell, or whatever. And they hadn't no sign of anything. And they just disappeared off of that guy's radar. And, they never contacted him again. And obviously, when you have some form of protection, it's good. And obviously, everything is always dependent because as buyers agents, like you want that form of protection, but obviously like you said about just, if we're not working well together, I'm going to rip this up and you move on. Cause there's no point in me trying to, if you're going to work with an agent, you're going to go off and, work with another agent. And I'm not
like, just give me the common courtesy to like, let me know where you're going to fire me and let me know why. We'll tear it up and it's garbage,
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think there's any connections between jiu-jitsu and real estate? Do you think there's like correlations between the two?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think for the most part, the very first thing is they're both entrepreneurial in nature because you get out of it what you put into it.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Like there are careers and there are, hobbies. There's things you can do where you can just like fake it and just completely fake it. But like, and anybody who's ever done jiu-jitsu knows like, there's no faking it on the mats.
Yeah.
Like you your true colors show when you're on the mats. Like there's no faking it whatsoever. And real estate is kind of the same way. Obviously, everybody says fake it till you make it, all the usual stuff. But for the most part, like when you really talk to people, if they know what they're doing, and if they know what they're talking about. Yep. And I think that's probably the biggest correlation, is just the fact that like if someone is dedicating themselves to it, they will succeed, and they will, and it compounds, right? The better you get at jiu-jitsu, the more you understand all of the positions, because there's so many facets to jiu-jitsu, same as real estate, and you don't know the problems. You could go through 10 years in real estate and 10 years of showing up to jiu-jitsu every single day and doing it, and you might be presented on that 10 year and day one with a problem you've never encountered before.
Yeah.
But you've built up this toolkit of all these different resources and all these experiences to be able to attack that problem. And I feel like that's why you really can't, you can't fake it all the way, and you need to like have time and effort and dedication. And if you do have that, then you'll be successful in both.
I love that you said that, because that is exactly like what's going in my head, is like each real estate transaction totally different. Every time you roll with somebody, it's different. Everybody has different styles, right? And the more that you roll, the more you're better equipped to handle those different situations, right? Or submissions or escapes or takedowns, right? Real estate, like the more experience you get, the more you know how to handle when a hurdle comes up in a transaction. Like, damn, dude, that was a good way to put real estate, because that is what it is. Like, it's when a hurdle happens, if I don't know how to take care of it, I'm trying to get people in my office. All right, so house didn't appraise. We're about 10,000. What are some unique ways we can kind of get over this? Like that kind of approach also works in jiu-jitsu, right? If you're having a hard time defending somebody's armbar, you go to another person and say, dude, I saw you were really good defending Steve's armbar. How do you escape? How did you navigate avoiding that position entirely? Damn, dude, what a good way to put that. I love that.
Thanks.
And the dedication piece too, right?
Yeah.
You have to be dedicated to it.
Yeah. And like when you think about real estate, like, for the most part, there's a lot of people who try it, and then after a couple months, or like, within the first year, they're like, I'm done. And I think the average fall off point for real estate agents is like 2 to 3 years, right?
Yep.
Right, I think it's about there. Happens. Well, like what's the average fallout point for jiu-jitsu that we always joke about is blue belt, right? And it's like 2 to 3 years. It's Dude, like the same, funny. Wow.
I didn't think of that before. Wow. That's wild. Are you only doing jiu-jitsu right now, or are you doing any like stand-up stuff?
So the one of the commercial deal that I did, I had friends who were brown belts and purple, and they're like, we're higher level jiu-jitsu guys that wanted to open up their own jiu-jitsu school. And so they had reached out to me. And we met on a Saturday in this office. And on Wednesday, we had already found the building, and then we were under contract by like the next Saturday, or something like that. It was like a week turnaround for like $1 million commercial building, which is wild. Yeah, it was awesome. But so they opened, and they have a little bit more of an emphasis on MMA. So like the school that I'm at right now, that I primarily train at, they have a Muay Thai program and a boxing program and a jiu-jitsu program. I pretty much only do jiu-jitsu there. But at the school that it just, they just opened up, I had actually helped them also find like a cage for sale. There was like an MMA promotion that wasn't doing, they were like, we're not doing MMA events anymore, with COVID and all that stuff. So we're going to sell it. So they sold their cage. So they sold them like a full size cage, elevated and everything like that. So once they got that cage in, I'm like, all right, I got to do a little bit of a stand up. So we've been doing some MMA rounds.
Cool. Alec getting his MMA gloves on, huh?
Yeah, putting the old MMA gloves on. So,
dude, for the record, by the way, you should not be a brown belt. That is not fair to you. You should be a black belt by now. And I know I haven't rolled with you in a while, so it's hard for me to say that, but with you had like a long, like a hiatus where you weren't training at a gym, but you were still training, right?
Yeah. So like with jiu-jitsu, so I got my purple belt, I think I was like 19 at Taikai, or like 18, 19, somewhere around there.
Right.
And no, I was 18. Yeah. I got my purple belt at like 18. What?
2010?
2011. Okay. Yeah, 2011.
All right,
I got it. I think it was it had to have been. No, it was 2012. I guess I was whatever. Yeah, I was 18. I was about to turn 19. That's what it was. It was 2012. So I got in 2012 at Taikai. Then about a year later, I moved. I moved down here, and I went to a school that was affiliated with Alliance for like a, I don't know, a month or so. The reason I went there is because they had sent guys back up to like some old seminars at Taikai. So like there was like pictures like on their wall when I walked in of like a couple of their guys like at Taikai.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like this seems like an all right place. And it just didn't necessarily fit. I knee barred one of their purple belts, and we almost got into like a fist fight because he was like, dude, we're doing IBJJF rules. Like I'm getting ready for pans. And I'm like, well, you could have told me that.
Yeah, just tell me.
Yeah, like so there was just like the gym itself wasn't like the facility wasn't super nice, and the gym itself like wasn't the best atmosphere. Like everybody was nice, but and like I obviously love like hard competition rolling. What was that?
For you, it just wasn't a good fit.
Yeah, it just didn't fit super well. So I went to another gym, and I actually pretended like I didn't know anything about jiu-jitsu because I was like, I want to see like how they talk to new students.
Yeah.
So I went to this gym, started talking to like their blue belt who was like helping to sign people up or whatever, and so we were just talking, and I was asking him all these questions and all, and everything. And he was just like treating me like I was like his best friend. And I was like, this is so cool. Like, this seems like a cool place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there, obviously back in those days, there wasn't a ton of like really high level guys down here. So I, took out my purple belt or whatever for like class. And he's like, wait, you're a purple belt? I was like, oh yeah, there was like a Grapplers Quest poster right behind us. I'm like, yeah, I actually used to ref for those guys. And he was like, what? Yeah. So
you're like, yeah, my dad's holding the camera actually.
like literally. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, like I know that I was there at that event. And then I just kind of like, got really like involved. Like I just loved the school. It was a great school. So I was a purple belt there for like 3 years, but then I moved 2015. Got married and had a kid my wife got pregnant. And then, so 2016, I stopped training there full time just because like with the work schedule and my wife's schedule and all this stuff, it just wasn't working out. So I actually got like 300 square feet of mats and put them in my basement or my garage.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, dude, it's awesome.
Hell yeah.
It's awesome. It's pretty great to be able to just like whip open the garage door and get some fresh air. And, I mean, like we can have like up to like probably about 4 pairs, I think is the max we've done.
Whoa,
but
that's pretty cool, dude.
Yeah, it's pretty big. So we're able to get a decent amount, and we're able to do normally 2 pairs doing like stand up, which is great. So I was doing that pretty regularly, and I got like a neighbor who eventually turned into a client because jiu-jitsu. He was starting to come over, and so I was teaching all these white belts, and I was only rolling with white belts for the longest time. And then I would like randomly go back into like the school that I used to train at, or like go to other schools, and I'm like, I feel crisper than I ever felt. And actually, Hodger was great at jiu-jitsu. But when Hodger went and opened his own schools in, I think it was Britain, and started training exclusively with white belts, that's when Hodger went from being like great to like greatest of all time level. And he accredits a lot of it to the fact that he got to be so technical because he wasn't just fighting for survival every day. He was like fighting to get every single technique perfect. And he says that his acceleration from starting to train with white belts like was so much faster than when he was training with similarly leveled guys. Obviously there's a mental toughness piece that goes with having those wars with people, but
it's also now you have a different approach to your coaching, right? Like he was a coach even before he went to Britain to open up his school, but like now you have all fresh new guys. You really have to like tone it down and go back to fundamentals, right? Like I feel like when I started teaching Thai, like I felt like my Muay Thai was like really plateaued for a while. And then when I started taking on the classes, I felt more confident. I was able to really articulate a lot more moves. I started thinking of things of like a not such a high complex level of all this crazy footwork I got to do and all these crazy setups, but more like, here's how you throw a rear kick. Focus on how you throw a rear kick. This is how we throw a switch kick. And that for me helped me feel more confident. So I've always thought that like when you become from a just training to coaching, I think that elevates your game tenfold.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like you said, you're focused on the basics, and I'm sure it's the same with real estate too, right? Like you can be a great real estate agent, but the second you start mentoring people and like taking people under your wing, you really have to think about like, how do I develop my business? How do I, and it's just like it's like everything. So
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. Because I feel like when I see like even like Ed, Big Ed started teaching jujitsu. Ed's always been a monster, but
yeah,
I would say I really like watching him teach now, and like with him teaching it, I can really see that he's like flourished in that. I mean, he's like he has this personality in with his teaching, which is hilarious, and I love it. But like I could really see him like loving it, and it shows in his teaching, and it's because it really forces you to like slow down, think of each step, make sure you're presenting it very well. I mean, I can't really roll with Ed and give him any kind of competitive competition. I can't give Ed any competition. He can just flick me with his finger. But it's still good watching him roll. I feel like watching him roll, he's rolling smoother, better. And I think a lot of it is now like he's coaching so much now at Taikai.
yeah, absolutely. I rolled with him like 4 weeks ago, like Labor Day ish.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and dude, I was just like, he was in he had gotten, gotten a side control, and I'm like, oh man, this guy's got DVD side control stuff. I'm like, let me see how long I can survive here.
Yeah, when I roll with Big Ed, it's like when your son wants to roughhouse with you, and you like put him in an airplane and just take his back willy nilly. That's pretty much what it is. He's like, "Hey, Cory, you want an airplane ride?"
Oh, that's awesome. But
yeah, dude. So, thanks for doing this. I feel like it's so funny that I know we said earlier, but like our lives have always had these parallels from retail to then real estate, always training jujitsu and having some kind of martial art background. So it was really cool getting to like catch up with you and really kind of figure out your business practices, like what has made you successful in your business.
Yeah, thanks, man. I was like super appreciative to be on when you said we wanted to do this. I was super excited. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be on a podcast, and people are like that's
dude, I'm making my way through the I did one with your dad. He was like one of my original people I did. I think it was even before I did video, if I remember correctly.
I think so.
I think it is. I don't think I have video with your dad.
I know I listened to the audio. I don't remember seeing any video of it, but I
don't think I have video. So now I did a podcast with you. Now next will be Maddie. I'll do a podcast with Maddie, and then we'll just start working down the line of all the Kearns family.
There you go. I like it.
Dude, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. And obviously I hope next time I'm up in Cuse we get a chance to roll and hang out.
Please. We're gonna roll, and then we're gonna get like pizza and beer after or something.
That sounds good, dude. Just talk real estate, talk shop, and give each other some advice. So I'd love to hear from the master.
God, hardly. Don't
stop, dude. Stop. Are you kidding me? Everywhere I look, I'm like, oh man, Cory's doing something. He's always got something going on.
I got my hands in the pot of all different kinds of hobbies. That's all.
Hey man, dude, I love that video. The one you posted on Instagram with you like as if you're like a video game. Like dude, that was awesome. I showed that to so many people.
That came from Spooches. That he was like, dude, you have so many hobbies, it's almost like a create a character in a video game. I was like, oh, that'd be a good video. I'll just do all my hobbies and just dress up in different outfits.
Dude, that was so awesome. Like I've been thinking, I'm like, I gotta steal that. I gotta totally steal that at some point because
dude, it's so easy to do. Is just set up a tripod, put an outfit on, hit record, do it for like 5 seconds, get a new one. Dude, it's so easy to do. I bet you could do it in like probably an hour.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
And were fantastic. People were dying watching that video. So
dude, that was so great.
It was successful.
I love that. And that's what I mean, dude. You're always doing something. You're on these panels and you're always doing these talks and stuff like that. And like, man, I love to see how successful you are and everything. And I'm excited to get that beer and that pizza with you at some point.
Dude, you're too nice to me. I'm gonna get out of here before my head gets too big.